The space station Aurealis floated silently between the stars, a shining hub of light and activity against the endless black. Ships of every shape and color docked at its massive ports carrying delegates, merchants, and travelers from hundreds of worlds. The station's walls were lined with glass that looked out into the void, showing swirling nebulae and distant planets. But it was not just the beauty of space that drew beings here. Aurealis was a place of politics, of decisions that could shape entire civilizations. Among the crowds of aliens, one figure moved quietly, almost unnoticed. His steps were calm and steady, his dark eyes observing everything. He was Elias Ward, one of the few humans granted permission to serve on the Galactic Council. Humans were rare in space politics, often underestimated, sometimes laughed at. But Elias carried himself with a quiet dignity that made others pause. He did not speak unless necessary, but when he did, his words held weight, though they were never loud or boastful. Elias had grown up on Earth, a world that had fought to survive in its own small corner of the universe. Humans were fragile in appearance, short-lived compared to many species and vulnerable by nature, yet they had a stubborn spark inside them. That spark had brought Elias across the stars to Aurealis, where he now represented humanity's voice. But not everyone appreciated this. Among the alien delegates, one watched him with eyes full of fire and pride. Captain Varela, a tall, scaled commander of the Tauran Empire. She moved with the grace and confidence of someone used to being obeyed, her golden eyes sharp and calculating. Varela had never understood humans. She believed they were weak, sentimental, incapable of true strength. And when she heard that Elias had been chosen to lead an important diplomatic mission for the Council, something inside her snapped. She could not accept that a fragile human could hold responsibility over beings like her. The day they were to meet officially, the council chamber buzzed with anticipation. Delegates whispered, and security drones hovered silently above. Elias entered the chamber carrying nothing but a simple tablet of notes. He walked past towering alien species, past banners and symbols of power, and took his seat quietly at the human section. No one could imagine how tense his calm made the room feel. Varela stepped forward, her claws clicking against the polished floor. She towered over most of the seated delegates, her scaled form gleaming under the chamber lights. Her voice rang out, clear and sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "So this is the human who thinks he can lead a council mission," she said, and every word dripped with disdain. Elias looked at her, not flinching. His calm stare seemed to pierce through her pride, and for a moment Varela felt a flicker of doubt, an emotion she was not used to experiencing. But she quickly masked it, letting her anger grow instead. "Tell me, human," she continued, her voice rising with controlled fury. "How can your kind possibly guide others? You are fragile, short-lived, and sentimental. Your world burns with conflict while you claim to speak for peace. You are not fit to stand among the stars. You are a mistake, and the council should not have allowed you here." The room fell completely silent. Delegates of other species stared, shocked by her audacity. Elias's presence seemed to calm the air, yet tension vibrated like a humming string in the walls. Many would have responded with anger, with defense, with fury. But Elias did none of these. He remained seated, his expression neutral, as if listening to a song he already understood. Then, after a few moments that felt like eternity, he did something unexpected. He stood slowly, as if each movement carried meaning. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue or retaliate. He simply turned on his heel and walked out of the chamber, leaving his tablet behind. The whispers that filled the room turned into stunned silence. Varela's eyes widened. Her claws dug into the floor as she laughed, sharp and cruel. "See?" she spat. "Humans run when faced with truth, fragile creatures, afraid of reality." But the other delegates did not laugh. Some frowned. Some looked confused. None of them were inspired by her words. It was as if Elias's quiet departure had shifted something in the air. His calm, his refusal to engage in anger, carried more power than any shout or threat could. Outside, the airlock doors slid open to the observation deck. Elias stepped through and gazed at the swirling gas giant below the station. The colors danced across his face, gold, blue, and white, reflecting off his thoughtful eyes. He breathed in deeply, letting the emptiness of space wash over him. In that quiet moment, he did not feel humiliation. He felt clarity. He felt strength. Not from arrogance, not from pride, but from the understanding that he could walk away from insult without losing himself. Elias knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Space was full of beings who underestimated humans, who mocked their fragility, who thought emotion was weakness. But he also knew that sometimes the greatest strength was not in fighting, but in choosing your own path calmly, without hatred, without fear. And with that thought, Elias turned toward the endless stars, ready to face whatever awaited him, even if it meant standing alone. The next council session began under a heavy, tense air. Delegates from hundreds of worlds filled the chamber, their voices echoing off the polished floors and steel walls. The hum of hovering security drones created a low, constant vibration, almost like the heartbeat of Borealis itself. Everyone waited, but the human seat remained empty. Some murmured, wondering why Elias Ward had not returned. Others shrugged, assuming the fragile human had finally abandoned the task. Captain Varela, however, saw it as her moment of triumph. She rose from her seat, her scaled body towering above the others. The sunlight from the observation windows glinted off her armor, making her appear almost like a golden statue of power. She fixed her eyes on the empty human chair and laughed, sharp and cutting, a sound designed to command attention. "See?" she hissed, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Even the human fears to face reality. Fragile creatures like these are not fit to lead, not in diplomacy, not in war, not anywhere." The council chamber was silent, but tension hung like a thick fog. Many delegates had heard of Elias Ward's calm composure, but none had witnessed it in person. Now they watched him absent from his seat, imagining a human who could walk away from insult without fear, without anger. The silence was almost louder than words. Suddenly, the sound of her claws against the polished floor made every delegate flinch. Varela leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes narrowing as she decided to strike where it would hurt the most. "I will not let this council be led by a being who is so weak that a few words can scare him off. You humans call yourselves intelligent, but what intelligence is there in running? What courage is there in hiding? Your kind are children pretending to be stars among gods." Her words echoed through the chamber like thunder, and for a moment, it seemed as though the room itself had stopped breathing. Whispers spread quickly, some shocked, some uncomfortable. Even those who disliked humans felt the cruelty in her tone, and a few could not hide a flicker of guilt. Meanwhile, Elias walked silently along the observation deck, far above the council chamber. Through the massive glass walls, he could see the station's rotating rings, the glowing blue of distant stars, and the swirling clouds of gas on the planet below. He did not hear Varela's insults directly, but he felt their weight through the vibrations of the station itself. Each word could have cut him, yet he felt only calm. He remembered the training he had undergone on Earth. Humans were taught that words could wound. Yes, but that control of oneself was far stronger than control of others. To be angry at every insult was to give away one's own power. Elias had learned to hold himself steady, to let others' emotions crash against him without sinking. As Varela continued her public humiliation, the council's reaction began to shift. Whispers of disbelief turned into quiet contemplation. Some delegates glanced at each other, nodding slowly, realizing that strength was not always measured by how loud or aggressive one could be. Some noticed the absence of the human as a statement itself, a statement that Elias's power lay not in words or weapons, but in restraint. In her anger, Varela failed to see the deeper truth. The human's calm defiance had begun to sway the room. Delegates who had once assumed humans were weak now wondered about the quiet figure who could stand above insult without breaking. After several long minutes, Varela leaned back, her pride still burning but now tinged with uncertainty. She had expected him to react, to shout, to beg, or even to leave in fear, but not this. He had walked away quietly, leaving her words to float empty in the chamber. Outside, Elias stopped near the railing of the observation deck, gazing at the swirling gas giant below. He let the silence of space enter him, letting it wrap around his thoughts. He did not feel shame. He did not feel fear. He felt clarity. He felt a strange power in knowing that the human spirit, calm and steadfast, could resist the barbs of pride and anger without becoming small or weak. For the first time, he understood something profound about himself. Humans had survived not because they were the strongest in muscle or weapons, but because they could endure insult, hardship, and cruelty with patience and courage. Their strength was quiet, invisible to those who relied on bluster, aggression, or intimidation. As he turned from the view, Elias made a decision. He would not retaliate. He would not seek revenge. He would continue his mission, not for the approval of others, not for pride, but because it was right. And in that moment, far above the council chamber and the mocking eyes of Captain Virella, he knew that the measure of a human was not in how loudly they could fight, but in how gracefully they could rise above hate. The council chamber remained tense below, unaware that the absence of one small human had already begun to change the hearts of many. The humiliation intended to break him had instead set the stage for something far greater, a quiet revolution of respect, courage, and the unique strength of a human soul. After leaving the council chamber, Elias walked slowly to the observation deck, his footsteps soft against the metallic floor. The chatter of the chamber, Virella's sharp voice, and the whispers of hundreds of delegates faded behind him. Out here, only the hum of the station's engines and the distant glow of stars surrounded him. The vastness of space stretched endlessly before his eyes, a reminder of how small conflicts on a single station really were. He leaned against the railing, staring at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. Blue and gold storms twisted like molten paint, illuminated by the light of distant suns. The beauty of it made his chest ache, not from fear or sadness, but from the weight of responsibility. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had hearts that could endure. They had survived wars, disasters, and extinction threats on Earth because they never gave up hope. Elias drew strength from that memory, letting it fill the empty spaces left by Virella's insults. His mind wandered back to his childhood, back to the small Earth home where his father had taught him the meaning of patience. Elias, his father had said one evening while they watched the sunset, people will always try to tear you down. They will mock what they do not understand. But your value is not in proving them right or wrong. It is in staying true to yourself no matter what they say. Those words now echoed louder than any voice in the council chamber. Elias closed his eyes and allowed himself a long, slow breath. He was tired, not from the council session itself, but from the constant need to prove himself to those who had already decided he was weak. Many species saw humans as fragile, sentimental, and short-lived. Yet, despite their doubts, humans had reached the stars. They had built ships, crossed galaxies, and survived where others might have failed. That stubborn spark, that refusal to give in, was the essence of humanity. He thought about Captain Virella. She had insulted him without restraint, mocking not only him but his entire species. She had laughed in front of hundreds, thinking her words could wound him. But Elias realized that her anger was her weakness, not his. Her pride blinded her to the quiet strength of restraint, and in that restraint lay a power far greater than any roar of anger. As he gazed at the spinning storms below, a new clarity emerged in his mind. The council chamber, the insults, the politics, they were distractions. The real challenge was far greater, helping the galaxy understand that strength did not always come from dominance, aggression, or intimidation. Sometimes strength came from calm, from patience, from the quiet courage to do what was right even when no one watched. Hours passed. Stars shifted in the sky, the gas giant's storm slowly changing pattern, and the station rotated gently in its orbit. Elias did not move. He did not rush back to confront Virella. He did not write a harsh message or demand an apology. He simply allowed himself to think, to plan, and to let the fire of human resilience burn quietly inside him. He reached for his tablet and began to write. Not a message to the council, not a complaint about Virella, but a report, an idea, a vision. It was a project he had been developing in secret, a way to share energy across systems, to help colonies survive disasters, to give struggling worlds a chance. He called it Project Beacon. Every line he typed was calm, precise, filled with care. This was his way to show the galaxy what humans could truly achieve, not through arrogance, not through confrontation, but through ingenuity, empathy, and quiet determination. For a long while, he simply stared at the tablet, imagining how it could change lives. He imagined the relief in a colony's eyes when they would feel the first pulse of shared energy. He imagined Virella and her crew realizing that a human who seemed small, fragile, and weak could do more good in one day than her empire might in a century. The observation deck remained empty except for him, yet it was not silent. The energy of his purpose seemed to hum along with the engines, as if the station itself recognized the weight of his resolve. He did not need recognition. He did not need applause. All he needed was the knowledge that he had chosen the right path, the human path, one of resilience, endurance, and hope. When he finally looked up, the stars seemed brighter, the storms below more vivid. Elias smiled faintly. Tomorrow he would return to the council, but he would do so not out of fear or pride, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knew his own value. Virella's insults had not broken him. They had only reminded him of what humans were truly capable of. Standing tall in the face of scorn, holding courage quietly and letting action speak louder than words. And in that moment, floating above Aurealis, Elias realized something profound. No insult, no mocking, no attempt to shame him could touch the core of a human heart. That core was resilient, steadfast, and brilliant, and it was only beginning to shine. Days passed, and the council chamber buzzed with activity. Yet one seat remained empty, Elias Ward's. Delegates whispered among themselves, their voices low and uncertain. Some shrugged, assuming the human had finally abandoned the task. Others frowned, remembering his calm demeanor, wondering why someone so seemingly quiet had chosen to vanish at the first sign of insult. Captain Virella, meanwhile, seethed. Her golden eyes glinted with irritation and disbelief. How could a single human, so fragile in appearance, so short-lived, ignore her words so completely? She had expected anger, a defensive outburst, or at least fear. Instead, he had walked away calmly, leaving her humiliation unfinished. It infuriated her more than she had expected. Pride, she realized, could burn hotter than any fire she had ever commanded. The council struggled to continue without him. Debates on trade agreements and interstellar treaties felt incomplete. Delegates glanced at his empty chair, sensing a missing presence. Many had begun to respect the human for his quiet confidence, even if he was not there. There was something in absence that spoke louder than words, the quiet strength of someone who did not need to prove themselves in front of a crowd. Then, reports began to arrive. At first, they were small, mundane updates, technical diagrams, engineering notes, and calculations submitted under Elias Ward's identification. Delegates barely noticed, but soon a larger file appeared, marked with bold letters. Project Beacon. Virella's claws dug into the armrest of her chair as she read the first few lines. Her eyes widened. This was no ordinary human project. The design outlined a system capable of transmitting energy across entire star systems. It could stabilize failing colonies, provide power to dying stations, and even supply critical support during disasters. No charge, no politics, no favors, just energy, freely shared for the survival of countless lives. Whispers filled the chamber. Delegates who had doubted humans now leaned closer to see the details. Engineers and scientists on other worlds would recognize this as genius. The sheer scale of the plan astonished everyone. Even Virella, who had once laughed at him, felt a knot form in her chest. She had mocked someone who had quietly created something far greater than her pride could imagine. Outside the chamber, Elias remained on the observation deck, unaware of the stir he had caused. He did not seek recognition. He did not care about applause. He was focused entirely on the potential of his creation. Each calculation, each diagram, each line of code had been written not to impress others, but to save lives. To him, the work itself was more important than any audience. Inside the chamber, the effect of his absence and his work began to ripple. Delegates started to reconsider their assumptions about humans. Perhaps they were fragile in body, yes, but they were not weak in spirit. Perhaps they did not need to shout to command attention. Perhaps patience, intelligence, and empathy were more powerful than claws, scales, or fleets of warships. Virella finally rose from her seat, her pride battered, but her mind sharpening. She had underestimated the human, assuming that an insult would break him. Instead, his absence and his quiet work had made the galaxy take notice. She realized reluctantly that strength was not measured by aggression. Sometimes the calm, steady hand of a human could achieve more than all the roars and threats of a proud empire. News of Project Beacon began to spread quickly. Systems in need of power, colonies recovering from natural disasters, even rival empires began requesting access. Delegates who had once whispered about human weakness now studied the design, asking how one fragile species could conceive something so vast, so precise, and so compassionate. The council chamber, once a place of tension and ridicule, slowly transformed into a room of wonder and respect. Varela, forced to witness it, felt a bitter sting of humility. She could not deny what he had accomplished, and she could not ignore the quiet courage it had taken for him to walk away from her insult and continue working in silence. Meanwhile, Elias, still far above the chamber on the observation deck, watched the stars. He did not know the impact he had caused below, but he felt a quiet satisfaction in his heart, a deep and steady knowledge that humans could endure insult, rise above scorn, and still do what was right. His work would speak for him, and in that, he found a power far greater than pride or anger, a power that came from patience, intelligence, and compassion. The council might have thought they were waiting for him to return. In truth, they were already witnessing the silent strength of a human who refused to be defined by cruelty. Elias Ward had shown them, without a single word, that human endurance and creativity could shine brighter than the pride of any empire. And in that silence, above the endless swirl of stars, the galaxy began to realize humans were not fragile. Humans were extraordinary. It started as a low hum, almost unnoticed at first, but soon, alarms blared across Aurealis, echoing through the massive chambers and corridors of the station. Lights flickered, screens went black, and the hum became a roar. The outer reactors, damaged by a passing meteor storm, were failing. The station shuddered, sending waves of panic through every deck. Delegates scrambled. Engineers ran along corridors, shouting technical jargon that no outsider could understand. Security personnel herded the delegates into safe zones. The council chamber became a chaotic whirl of noise, fear, and tension. Even Captain Varela, used to commanding fleets and armies, felt helpless. The pride and arrogance she had carried for so long crumbled in the face of a simple, unstoppable truth. The station was dying. For the first time, she wished the human was there. Meanwhile, Elias Ward remained calm, as he always did. He had anticipated the possibility of failure in the station's systems. Months earlier, when he had drafted Project Beacon, he had designed it not only to transmit energy across star systems, but also to stabilize failing stations like Aurealis in emergencies. Every line of code, every diagram, every calculation had been made with care, with foresight, and with hope. He activated the system from the observation deck. His hands moved steadily across the controls, his mind perfectly focused. Outside, a faint golden glow began to ripple across the station's hull. Engineers glanced at their displays in confusion. Energy readings surged. The failing reactors began to stabilize. Lights flickered back on, stronger than before. The hum of power returned, steady and comforting. A voice echoed over the station intercom, calm and controlled. "This is Elias Ward. Project Beacon is online. Power redistribution is in effect. All systems should return to normal." Panic turned into astonishment. Delegates froze, staring at the displays as the golden energy flowed through the station. The outer rings stabilized. Life support systems returned to normal. The station shuddered once more, but this time it was relief, not fear. Captain Varela watched, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. The human she had mocked, insulted, and dismissed had saved the station. Her pride roared in her chest, clashing with the undeniable truth. He had not only survived her insults, he had acted when it mattered most, quietly, without expectation, without boast. Delegates began to murmur among themselves, admiration and awe replacing fear. Engineers were already noting the system's stability, realizing its brilliance. Project Beacon was no longer just a concept on a tablet. It was real, it was working, and it had saved hundreds of lives. Varela clenched her fists, feeling a mix of humiliation and respect. She had expected weakness. She had expected fear. But Elias had shown her that human strength was something different, quiet, steady, and unstoppable when focused on the right purpose. Elias did not wait for praise. He did not seek acknowledgement. He continued to monitor the energy flows, adjusting minor variables, ensuring every system was fully operational. Every human instinct of patience, endurance, and empathy guided his actions. In a crisis, humans did not panic. They adapted, they persevered, and they saved lives, often silently. The council chamber, now restored to order, was buzzing with astonishment. Delegates spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the human who had turned disaster into salvation. Rumors began to spread. reaching far-off colonies and outposts. Humans, they whispered, were more than fragile. They were capable of miracles born from courage, intellect, and heart. Virella, still in the chamber, finally spoke aloud, her voice quieter than usual, almost reverent. He did this. A human. Alone. She looked at the empty seat where Elias had been. The realization hit her harder than any weapon could. The human had not sought glory, but he had reminded her in the most undeniable way that strength came in forms she had never considered. Outside, Elias stepped back from the controls and gazed at the golden glow surrounding Aurealis. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, not pride, not triumph, but deep calm. The station was safe. Lives were saved. And the galaxy in small ways had begun to notice. In the quiet of the observation deck, surrounded by the vastness of space, Elias felt a simple truth settle in his heart. Humans were not measured by muscle or scale, by claws or size, or by how loudly they could shout. Humans were measured by courage, by intellect, by patience, and by the willingness to act when it truly mattered. And today, he had shown the galaxy the meaning of that human strength. After the crisis at Aurealis, the council chamber was filled with a strange quiet. The hum of the station's engines and the soft chatter of delegates had returned, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where there had been tension, doubt, and rivalry, now there was awe. Every delegate knew what had happened. Elias Ward, the human they had underestimated, had saved the station. Captain Virella sat in her seat, her scaled hands folded tightly on the desk. She stared at the empty human chair and struggled with a truth she had never allowed herself to admit. She had been wrong. She had insulted him openly, mocked him without restraint, and expected him to falter. But he had not faltered. He had acted quietly, effectively, and brilliantly, ensuring the safety of every life on Aurealis. Her pride burned like fire in her chest, but beneath it was something she had never felt before. Humility. For the first time, she understood that strength was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and full of patience. Elias had shown her that, and now she knew she had to face him. The observation deck was empty except for Elias, who was reviewing data from Project Beacon. The golden glow from the station's renewed energy bathed his face in soft light. He was calm, focused, completely unaware of the storm of emotions brewing in Virella. She approached quietly, her steps careful on the metallic floor. Elias noticed her, but he did not speak immediately. He had learned long ago that people often needed time to find their words, especially those burdened by pride. Elias, she said at last, her voice low, controlled, but carrying a weight it had never held before. I insulted you. I shamed you in front of everyone. I thought I knew what humans were, and I was wrong. You have saved this station. You have saved lives that I cannot even begin to count. And I owe you an apology. Elias looked at her, his dark eyes calm, and for a moment said nothing. He did not smile, nor did he frown. He simply nodded slightly, as if acknowledging that her words were sincere. Apology accepted, he said quietly. That is enough. Virella swallowed, unsure of what to say next. She had never expected to feel such a strange mix of guilt and respect. She wanted to argue, to claim her authority, to remind him that she was a commander, a warrior, a leader of her empire, but she could not. Elias had taught her, without trying, that humility and action carried more weight than titles or threats. You could have stayed angry, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. You could have refused to act, refused to save us.
Yet you did not.
You acted quietly, without expectation, without need for recognition. And now I see the truth. Humans are stronger than I ever imagined. Elias's gaze shifted to the swirling gas giant below. Strength, he said softly, is not in pride or power, Virella. It is in choosing to do the right thing, even when others doubt you or insult you. That is what humans do. That is what I have done. She looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting both the station's light and her own. Newfound understanding. For a long moment they stood in silence. The only sound, the distant hum of the engines and the gentle swirl of storms below. She felt a deep respect growing inside her, one that would not fade with time. Elias, she finally said, I will not forget this. I will not forget what you have done or what you have shown me. You are extraordinary, not because of strength in battle, but because of courage, intelligence, and heart. You are the best of your kind. Elias gave a faint smile, the kind that did not boast or demand praise. "Thank you, Captain. That is kind of you to say. But what matters is not recognition. What matters is that we all survive and that we all do what is right." Virella's chest tightened. She had been proud, arrogant, and dismissive, yet this human had not reacted with hatred or revenge. He had simply acted calmly and decisively, showing her and the entire galaxy the power of restraint, patience, and human spirit. For the first time, she did not feel superior. She did not feel in control. She felt humbled, inspired, and most importantly, changed. Elias had not only saved Aurealis, he had saved her understanding of what true strength could be. As she stepped back, allowing him to continue his work, she realized something she had never known before. Humans could teach even the proudest beings lessons about courage, restraint, and honor. And in that quiet observation deck, under the swirling stars and golden light of the station, Virella silently vowed never to underestimate a human again. Weeks had passed since the crisis on Aurealis, and the station had slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Delegates moved through corridors with renewed energy, engineers continued repairs and upgrades, and life in the council chamber hummed with routine. But the story of Elias Ward, the human who had saved them all, had not faded. His presence was quiet yet undeniable. Every corner of the station carried traces of his influence, from the repaired energy grids to the intricate algorithms of Project Beacon. Delegates spoke of him in hushed tones with awe and respect, recounting how a human, small, fragile, and underestimated, had walked away from insult only to return with action that saved hundreds of lives. Captain Virella visited the observation deck often. She no longer carried her armor of arrogance or the sharpness of pride that had once defined her. When she watched Elias work, she saw more than a human engineer. She saw patience, intellect, and courage intertwined in one quiet, steady figure. Each time she approached him, she felt that strange mix of humility and inspiration, the kind that reshaped one's understanding of strength itself. "You continue to work without seeking praise," she said one evening, leaning against the railing beside him. The gas giant below spun in slow, beautiful swirls of blue and gold. "It is remarkable." Elias glanced at her, his calm eyes reflecting the storming colors of the planet. "Praise is unnecessary," he said simply. "What matters is the work, the lives it helps, and the hope it brings. That is enough for me." She nodded, absorbing the truth in his words. She remembered the day she had insulted him, the pride that had once filled her, and the crushing realization of her own arrogance. That moment of humility had changed her, and now, watching him in quiet action, she realized the depth of what humans could achieve. Project Beacon had begun to spread beyond Aurealis. Other stations, colonies, and even entire planets requested guidance on its implementation. Humans, for all their seeming fragility, were proving their worth across the galaxy. Elias had not just saved lives, he had reshaped the understanding of what a human heart could do in the vast, indifferent expanse of space. The human had no desire for glory. He taught engineers and students patiently, shared his knowledge freely, and inspired confidence not through words but through example. The galaxy began to see humans differently, not as weak, sentimental creatures, but as beings capable of vision, endurance, and profound courage. Virella often stood beside him silently, watching him work. She never interrupted, never demanded attention. She had learned that sometimes the greatest impact came from observing and learning, not commanding or criticizing. Her respect had grown into something deeper, an understanding that humans could teach even the proudest beings lessons about perseverance and morality. One evening, as the observation deck glowed with the golden light of Project Beacon, Elias turned toward the vast emptiness of space. Stars stretched endlessly, and in that infinite quiet, he felt a profound connection to the station, to the galaxy, and to the humans he represented. His species, once underestimated, now had a voice not because of brute strength but because of heart, mind, and patience. Virella watched him, her golden eyes reflecting both pride and humility. She remembered every insult she had thrown at him, every mocking word, and she shivered at the contrast to the truth of what he had accomplished. A human who had walked away from scorn now stood at the center of hope, not because he sought power, but because he had chosen to act with integrity. The legacy of that human heart began to ripple outward. Colonies thrived where they once struggled. Energy flowed where it had once faltered. Systems that had doubted humans now studied them, inspired not by fear but by respect. And Elias Ward remained at the heart of it all, quietly, patiently, unassuming yet extraordinary. As the golden light of Project Beacon shimmered across the observation deck, Varela finally spoke, her voice soft. "I will never forget what you have done or who you are. Humans are remarkable." Elias smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried neither pride nor arrogance. "We are not perfect," he said, "but we endure. We act and we care. That is our strength." She nodded, understanding fully now. In a galaxy of vast empires, powerful fleets, and endless ambition, the quiet courage of a human heart had proven more powerful than all the pride in the universe. Elias had shown them all the meaning of resilience, hope, and quiet heroism. And in that calm, infinite light of the stars, one truth became clear. Humans were not fragile. Humans were extraordinary. Elias turned once more to the stars, the endless possibilities ahead reflecting in his eyes. He did not walk for glory. He did not act for recognition. He walked because humanity always did, forward, patiently, bravely, and with heart. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, began to follow.